Dear friends, greeting to all of you. We are at the 57th video of the Divine Order and the Universe Reading and Commentary series. This month, my dear sister Oya Emir will join me.
Good to be here with you and with our dear friends. Thank you for this second opportunity of joining you in this series. I think you have some good news for all of us, correct?
Yes. The good news is, this is the 17th edition of the Divine Order and the Universe's original Turkish version. And let's start reading from this book, fresh out of the printing house. A man that lives in the world should know, above else, what his duty is, about what he prepares for, from where he comes and where he goes to, and especially how to behave according to the concepts of good and evil, in the sense we have just described. And unless he knows these, there will be neither a necessity nor possibility to rise upwards, to the plan of duty. For as long as he stays in this state, there is no deed for him to do in the plan of duty. For this, he needs to be prepared for the necessities of the higher plan, and to return many times to the world within various links of the chain of embodiments. It is impossible to accept that a man whose comprehension works merely in automatic ways, while doing even the simplest deeds, could immediately attain the power to grasp the relations of the universal events and matter, combinations on the face of the causality principle and sublime necessities, and could reach the scope of capability to conduct the sublime deeds of the vast realms by comprehending all responsibilities of them at the end of a world incarnation of 50-60 years, seeing that even the comprehension of the most hard-working man develops throughout the whole life with the speed of an ant. It is a mistake to think that attaining such a universal comprehension is possible within a few world lives. Therefore, the beings attaining the merit of a complete knowledge of duty is possible only after completion of the rings of the chain of lives which are passed on in the human body for tens of thousands of years in the world.
Yes, dear friends, we are here and now of a process we lived through tens of thousands of years. Let's just look back at our development, the magnificence of living in this body right now by the constant flow of influences from our being. The last sentence of this passage moves me so much that I started talking about the end of the passage. Yes, here and now, at this moment, we are the culmination of that development that lasted tens of thousands of years. And, in our times, we observe and of course, we have the first-hand experience the increasing speed of the events in our daily and communal life. The most recent example is this corona pandemic. The great majority of the world population is under the constant pressure of social, cultural, economic, and environmental problems. And, after the disclosure of the divine order and the universe, and after reading the passages on the looming signs of the climate change, or of the shifting of magnetic poles etc., we become more observant of the fact that all of these events are for the further development of the being. And, thanks to the knowledge given in this book, we try to understand and comprehend more and more the message of the events as we encounter them. As you and Emir discussed last week, all of these is for increasing and widening of our comprehension's capacity. Since this is our aim, we must ask, how can we widen our being's capacity of comprehension? What can we do? What should we do? Of course, in our public lectures, and in this reading and commentary series, we share some knowledge, we try our best to explain concepts. But actually, the answer to these questions is, we must observe and transform our reactions to the events in our life. We must understand which realities we are in, from which realities we think, choose, and act. Yes, in this very long process of development, our starting stage was an automatic reality, but because we are not in that starting points anymore, so we must ask, how can we become more conscious in the higher realities? Which states and circumstances we need to activate in our life for the further development of our being? This will be realized by the guidance of our conscience, by the directions given to us by the conscience mechanism, and by our internal questioning. By doing this, we may begin to understand that we are at a level of comprehension reaching further, towards the intuition of duty. I frequently say in my public lectures that the circumstances we are in is the best for us, Because even the worst circumstances contain myriad oscillations or swinging between the two opposite sides of the conscience mechanism. And if we can be observant as we swing back and forth, we can evaluate a given situation from many different angles and perspectives. And noticing and becoming conscious of the fact that this is an experience helping out further development. And as our development advances, then, all other beings in our vicinity may benefit from this, and how each seemingly small observation may change us individually and communally, and how this leads to a cascade of beneficial changes in the whole human family. Yes, at this level we reached after tens of thousands of years. This must be our main task.
I'd like to underline first that the average lifespan of a human being is stated in this book as 50 to 60 years. This book was compiled by Mr. Ruhselman in 1959. By 2022, the average lifespan of the world population is 72. And the longest lifespan ever recorded is 122. Still, from the perspective of the being and the spirit, even the longest life is very short. And we read here that average human life is short too. Reach the scope of capability to conduct the sublime deeds of the vast realms by comprehending all responsibilities of them at the end of a world incarnation. Well, we cannot argue against this fact because humans do most of their daily chores and actions automatically. Moreover, within these automatisms, humans have easily evoked or triggered emotions that sweep them like dried leaves in the wind. Anger can take over a human's mind, thirst of vengeance can become a sole motivation, etc. Instead of, as you said, observing all his or her approaches and responses to life events, by processing these through the filters of rationale and conscience, humans tend to become dragged and swept by the flash floods of emotions, and this situation is so common that we can see and or experience more than a few examples of such reactions every day. The last one we heard in the news was a man driving dangerously, and when stopped by the other drivers, this man goes out of his car with an axe in his hand, just to show his anger to the protesters. His first action is wrong, driving dangerously, but when others informed about him about this unsafe driving with their flashlights and horns, instead of slowing down by taking the responsibility his mistake, he stops his car to cut the other car's lane, and moreover, goes out of his car with an axe. Can we assume that such a person is acting consciously? No, we cannot. By resorting to aggressive and threatening reactions, that man tries to justify himself in his own way, and displays the level of his self-centeredness. And such reactions rapidly expand like bushfire. And yes, the reason of the increase in the number and intensity of the individual and communal events in our world is the increase in the interactions and conflicts among all those different realities and magnetic field interactions, because the end of this world cycle is getting closer, and of course, all beings are trying to complete all needs and unfinished business that are outlined in their life plans. And when we look at our lifetimes, regardless of their length, sometimes babies die in the womb even before they are born, or after birth, or in very young ages. But living, let's say, years, does not mean that that life was lived productively, in the sense of the evolutionary development. There are lifetimes spent without any intentional actions, or withdrawn due to some resentment, or spent within numbing distractions, etc. Yet, the divine order in the universe reminds us that a man that lives in the world should know, above else, what his duty is, about what he prepares for, from where he comes and where he goes to. And previously, we had read that he promised to stay true to this plan in the world. And the real pangs of conscience that human being will suffer from are because of forgetting or retracting this promise. Of course, it is not so easy to remember that promise when in this physical body, because the oppression of matter and life events and the defense mechanisms make it hard to remember. And due to this fact, we can only be mostly in automatic states, or at best, more or less comprehending or semi-comprehending states. And because we don't have complete comprehension, At this human stage of the hydrogen cosmos, even our breakthroughs, aha moments and awakenings are transitory, they wax and wane in a flash. We assume that such states will be forever, but to sustain that state of comprehending is not easy, because the automatisms are still too strong. Let me read, a human. Unless he knows how to behave according to the concepts of good and evil in the sense we have just described, there will be neither a necessity nor possibility to rise upwards to the plan of duty. Therefore, when we make efforts in widening our comprehension, possibilities will emerge on our path. For example, synchronicities, as Jung named them. Imagine the numerous plans and beings in duty working for the emergence of such synchronicities in our life, so we can understand the message and meaning they carry and widen our comprehension. And if we cannot acknowledge and appreciate this immense opportunity, well, rearranging all details for the emergence of such synchronicities may entail an immense organizing again. Still, this depends on our efforts. If we don't make efforts for this purpose, then such rearranging may not occur. And even, just because there cannot be another opportunity for a being, just because that human being got stuck to hatred, vengeance, stubbornness, intolerance, prejudices and fixed beliefs so much that, then, that lifetime needs resetting. And we call this as death. And this is valid for the whole human family, as it is valid for a single human being. If the whole humanity is stuck in such a rut, and we see the examples of how we are failing most of such global tests and trials related to conscience, related to global cooperation, coordination, and solidarity, then the humanity needs a reset as well. So, all those hardened beliefs and judgments can be transformed. And throughout the human history, it is observed many times how degeneration increases toward the end of some certain cycles, like the collapse of empires. Kingdoms and nations, all realities appear with their all facets. What prevailed so far begins to become corrupted, values and meanings becomes hollowed, morality diminishes, etc. The old gradually decomposes so the new can emerge and replace the old. And another phrase I'd like to underline. Even the comprehension of the most hard-working man develops throughout the whole life with the speed of an ant. This reminds me the nursery rhyme in the tales. I went a long way. I went straight up and down the hill, passing through the meadow grass by harvesting flowers and drinking cold water. In 6 months and 1 autumn, I just moved as much as a barley seed length. Of course, we understand that the speed of the ant and the length of the barley seed are relative for each human being. They increase or decrease depending on the efforts we make in the directions of further development of our comprehension and conscience.
Your words reminded me something. You know, sometimes a sudden flash of comprehension happens, but do we understand this as it is, as a flash of comprehension? I mean, we have this kind of blindness as well. Or an opportunity appears in front of us, or an awareness about something occurs. In a way, the beings in duty are telling us we offer this to you, and they do this all the time, but somehow, we may not notice that this is a providence in the midst of other distracting processes of daily life. I mean, if we tend to keep our antennas folded, if we are more inclined to sensuality or earthly cravings, and consequently, if we choose losing ourselves within the ever-changing moods and realities of intense emotions, then, of course, we cannot notice such moments. Because of this, we need to check, let's say, our inner inbox every day, maybe when we go to bed, for at least 5 minutes, to see that if we got any moments of awareness, any flash of comprehension during the day. Reviewing our experiences at the end of each day may be beneficial, and may make us vigilant about such occurrences in the following days.
Another important point here is, it is a mistake to think that attaining such a universal comprehension is possible within a few world lives. Let alone a single life, this cannot happen even with a few lifetimes. That is why is possible only after completion of the rings of the chain of lives, which are passed on in the human body for tens of thousands of years in the world. Some dear friends mentioned that there is a new, I am special trend going on in the circles of spiritual people. They say that the beings who greatly suffer from abuse, mistreatments, and all kinds of other troubles in life are beings who come to this world for the first time, and they sacrifice themselves on behalf of humanity. The purpose of their shouldering so much suffering, their attracting so many problems, is to incarnate only once, and by this great sacrifice, while saving humanity, they will ascend directly to heavens or fifth or sixth dimension. Well, it seems that we are witnessing the emergence of new fantasies to explain the increase in the suffering and troubling events. And many people feel that they can only endure suffering if they can put a "you are victim but you are a special victim" label. Yes, I wanted to share this new trend I heard about, that our dear friends can be aware of such fantastic explanations. And what we read in this passage in the divine order in the universe disproves this. I mean, instead of such utopic and fantastic trends, I'd like to underline the importance of the down-to-earth spiritualism.
And the principles are important for us. There are some certain laws and principles stated and explained in the divine order and the universe. And in this series, we study these, for example, causality principle, incarnation, life plan, our duality unit of two opposite poles, etc. When we strengthen our mental ground with these underlying principles, our mental foundation becomes strong, and we can build up many other layers of knowledge and theories upon this. Yet, when there is no mental foundation, when some people hear a new information and they may turn this information into a fantasy or a conspiracy theory. However, if we have a sound foundation, then we can test such new information against these principles, and we can check our inner reactions and responses to this new info by checking both poles of the conscience mechanism to see if this addresses our side of sensuality, of earthly cravings, or our side of intuition of duty. We can check if this is a true need for our being's development, or a sensual attraction that pulls us into creating a defense mechanism about our own troubles and problems. Yes, I can understand why people tend to look for such labels to make their pains and suffering more endurable. Such explanations may be a kind of band-aid.
They step into or join in another illusion.
We are already live within many illusions. As Buddhists say, this is Maya, illusions of the phenomenal world. As people who are trying to discover our own reality, when an idea pops up that may promise a shortcut or an escape and at the same time, akin to the knowledge we already are attracted to, then, we can easily become hooked by such information or ideas. So, it is always beneficial if we check any new information by asking, what does this say to me in relation to these principles?
All right, let's continue reading. After this knowledge, it is easily understood that for mankind in the world, there is no question of obligation of duty. For, the order of the universe, which is based on immutable truths, cannot be executed by the realities connected to the superficial time comprehension in the world. In order to attain the honor of meddling with such great deeds, mankind need to go through the stages of preparations we explained above, and here the most perfect mechanism which helps them is the conscience mechanism. The shifting of the conscience mechanism towards the higher parts means that its levels of equilibrium are getting increasingly established at levels which get closer to attaining the necessary qualities for these great obligations. That is, it means the setting up of the equilibria between them in the fields increasingly closer to the plan of duty, and the making up of the opposite components out of the materials closer to the necessities of duty. Therefore, the oppositeness here is seen not in forms of tugs which have schisms in between, as it is in lower levels, but as a harmonious advance whose intention is supporting each other and reconciliation. After all, another meaning of the completion of the human cycle is the abolishment of the opposition between components of the conscience duality. For example, while in the conscience mechanism at the lower level, there is an opposition between the emotions of forgiving or hanging a man who killed his father. At the higher level, It displays a duality in the form of preferring this or that way of easing the pangs the same killer will feel anyway because of this bad deed. And for a man, this is rather a more or less sweet activity of a comprehending preparation for the knowledge of duty than an exhausting opposition.
It seems like, as the humankind of today, we are still at the schisms mentioned in this passage. Yes, at the lower levels of the conscience mechanism, we are churned and agitated in the midst of sensuality and intense emotions. It is always black or white, bad or good, ugly or pretty, or as the example given here, forgiving or hanging a man who killed his father. This is mostly an either/or mentality. The extreme ends of the pendulum. For example, two sides of a schism, eye for an eye until everyone is blind. This is the reality of an initial human being. Yet, as the being gets developed in comprehension and conscience, between these two extreme ends, between the black and the white, grays and shades of grays begin to appear. As in the example given in this passage, a passing towards the upper or higher levels of conscience gradually occurs, and then, searching for this or that way of rehabilitation, or of easing the pangs the killer will feel anyway because of this act of killing. These examples of approaches related to lower levels and higher levels of the conscience mechanism are especially meaningful for all of us, right now. Because, almost all of us are straddled over this schism, two opposites are clashing within us, especially as we live the consequences of the heavy systems of global sensuality, of the global cravings, around us. In many countries, there are so many atrocities that even witnessing these from the comfort of our living rooms is painful for us. At the same time, we remind ourselves the fact that all those hardships they go through is the refining experiences those beings need, and as they go back and forth between the lower and higher levels of their conscience mechanism, we, as bystanders or witnesses, go back and forth between the lower and higher levels of our conscience mechanism. Yes, it is obvious that, as the whole human family, we are still unable to reach ever higher levels of our conscience mechanism. And as a part or a member of this human family, we need to review our daily life, as I previously mentioned, by asking questions to ourselves and by answering sincerely. What are we doing about those pains and suffering we witness to? What kind of responses we give? What kind of responses we cannot give? Between which realities we go back and forth? How does all those painful and troubling events affect us? Yes, this is a target, asking such questions to increase our self-knowledge for properly reaching the higher levels of our conscience mechanism.
Yes, you are right. This is the purpose of all these events we encounter. Experience firsthand or as observers. Actually, years ago, I personally experienced an interesting encounter with an ex-con, charged with manslaughter and sentenced to 25 years in prison. I think I had shared this as an example in one of the previous videos. Back then, I was traveling frequently, and after a business trip, my plane landed in Istanbul, and I took a taxi. Traffic was heavy, and that taxi driver heard a few of my phone conversations and asked if I am a doctor or a therapist, and we started to talk. And at some point the driver said, "You know, sis, I am just out of the prison." I was like, oh, but asked him, "Why you were in prison?" He said, "I killed a man and I was sentenced to years." I said, "Good that your sentence is done now. Good that you started a new life." And he said, "I'd like to ask you something. I'd like to hear what you think." And told me that his father and brother had took over his properties while he was in prison. And he said, "Now, a part of me says that go and kill them. But another part of me says, you already spent 25 years in prison, don't do that because you will go back to prison again." He was hesitant, torn between these two options. Imagine how wide that schism was within him. When he asked for my opinion, I said, "Let's say you kill them, what will happen?" He said, "I will get back what was mine and be in peace." Then I asked, "Let's say you don't kill them, then what will happen?" He replied, "I just got my freedom back." Again I asked, "What do you feel that now you got your freedom back?" He replied, "I felt peace." Then I said, "So, the mutual purpose of this part that says go and kill them, and that part that says don't kill them, is to give you peace. Now, just check. Which piece is more valuable? more precious for you. Until we arrive at my destination, we talked about pros and cons of those choices, and when he stopped the car and taking my luggage out, he told me, "Sis, I didn't understand most of the things you told me, but I understood that you told me good things." That was an experience for me to see the limits of my flexibility. Later I pondered upon if I could be more flexible with my language, with the terms I used back then. I mean, no matter how hard I try to simplify the spiritual terms and concepts I am familiar with, still I have miles to go. At least he had intuited that I wanted to convey him some good or better options. And, even though his prison period may look like a bad experience to us, please notice that the knowledge he gained from becoming prisoned for so long had become a knowledge of comparison for this man. It was stopping him from doing the same thing, from giving the same reaction. He was questioning, weighing his options. In this sense, life is the greatest instructor. It really attracts events and other beings in accordance with our reality and our level of comprehension. As we read in the previous passage, in an average human life of 50 to 60 years, that man spent 25 years of his life in a prison, together with other convicts from many different realities, and he gained awareness and widened his comprehension so that he was able to assess his options. Yes, events and circumstances always push us toward the upper levels of the conscience mechanism.
This encounter, taking his taxi that night, that synchronicity puts two of you together, is so precious. And both of you acknowledged and utilized this opportunity given at that moment. He reached to you and you reached to him. One of you or both of you could miss this chance. Just it happened in your example, if a being needs to gain some awareness about something, a chance encounter happens, or as that person is walking in the street, hears some words spoken by another person passing by, etc., and a breakthrough happens. I am sure many of our dear friends had such experiences.
Yes, when I got out of that taxi, I was not the same Tülin that took that taxi at the airport, and that man was not the same taxi driver who picked up a passenger at the airport. Let's hope that that man has chosen the right path for him. Compared to other fellow human beings who struggle with myriad problems, traumas, hardships, sufferings, addictions, etc., most of us lead a very stable lifetimes, and I say bravo to those sisters and brothers who are in very troubling realities. Right now, as we observe all those atrocities, war, refugees, economic inequality, and all of our prejudices against each other, etc., it looks like we have eternal miles to go. As though a huge part of humankind became callous, and sometimes callous parts cannot be softened and had to be cut off. Well, personally, I think that the patience of the divine system is limitless. Our guiding being, all beings in duty relentlessly work to bring out events, encounters, opportunities, options, choices that may allow our awakening. Such an endeavor. And the influences are coming at us from all angles, from all directions. And what was the purpose? To widen our comprehension. And we now know that comprehension and conscience advance in tandem. And how conscience or conscientious acts and deeds emerge in us? By observing and knowing the opposition between the two sides of our duality unit, and consequently, by gaining knowledge of comparison. The point made in this passage is the wide schism between these opposites. Yet we see that a major part of the humanity of today ever widen these schisms, instead of narrowing these. Yes. Let's continue reading. This initial conscientious flux of the preparation to the plan of duty has been explained by the religious and moral institutions, and they bonded these with some several discipline sanctions. These initial fluxes of conscience have been taken by these institutions within the duality of virtues and vices, and these sanctions have led mankind automatically towards the virtues that make up the higher opposite of the conscience. Most powerful and to the point sanctions of this automatism are the symbols of the heaven, which is promised to the good ones, and the hell, which is particular to the bad ones. We have said that symbols of heaven and hell are up to the point, Indeed, all advances in the lower levels where the line of equilibrium of the conscience is established, and that belong to the badness we call selfishness, carry along all kinds of torture and suffering which cannot even be expressed by the concept of hell. On the other hand, levels of equilibrium of conscience duality that are set in the higher parts contain the feeling of happiness of self-sacrifice, altruism, love, and especially of the love of duty which the symbol of heaven attempts to express.
Yes, we had read in the previous pages about the symbol of heaven in relation with the plan of love. Here, we read another explanation about this symbol. However, I'd like to remind our dear friends that while we study these concepts, we must take the time and mentality of the periods those concepts emerged into consideration. I mean, it is better to take these concepts as a knowledge given at those periods of the family of humankind. Still, I think, in the current time period all of us live in, there are individual hells for each of us. And in this passage, a clear roadmap to spatium is given, when we die and leave this physical body behind, in that isolated field of spatium that our being reviews and make a great accounting of all those impressions accumulated in our unconscious. The pain and suffering we may feel because of seeing our choices made from the sensuality, from the earthly cravings is like a hell. On the other hand, we can see this period as a heaven because of the bliss we will feel when we reviewed our choices and acts made from the intuition of duty side of our conscience mechanism. So, humankind had been informed about the spatium period, and the bliss and the beauty that await us had been explained by these symbols in accordance with the realities of those earlier times. Yes, I mentioned about individual hells. For example, while we are live on a lecture, internet connection fails and this becomes a personal hell, a mini hell for us, until the internet connection restores and we are online again. Then, it feels like heaven of meeting with you again. I mean, we have these mini hells and mini heavens continuously as the realities we are in constantly change even within a moment. However, as human beings that intend to work on ourself, to increase our self-knowledge, to learn about our being, our purpose is to transform our inner hell to our inner heaven, that is, discovering, acknowledging and transforming our opposing components, our sides and parts that stay hidden even from our daily consciousness. And as we do this, we begin to see which ones are more dominant within us. Do we respond to life events from the side that stay in the shadows, that hellish side that is full of earthly cravings of sensuality? Or, do we respond to life events from the heavenly side, the side of the intuition of duty that is full of love, compassion, selflessness, altruism? Our responses from either side change with our experiences, our realities, but as we begin choosing and acting more and more conscientiously, then love of duty emerges within us. And this is such a natural state that we can live within that higher reality as a flow of cooperation, coordination, and solidarity with other beings, without even thinking about this or that act or choice is related to the duty or not. It will become a natural state for us. Actually, there are many moments as such in our daily life. We are not aware of these, only when someone mentions about these, we even feel surprised. A friend says, "Years ago, you said something to me and my life changed," or "I was feeling so hopeless and you dropped by, and your smile gave me hope for becoming better." Or "You made a joke and made me laugh that day and somehow, the dark clouds over my head vanished." Such small things we do without even knowing we do these. And these are the smallest examples of that natural state of love of duty I mentioned. Yes, as we work on ourselves, as we increase our knowledge of comparison by observing our swings in the pendulum of conscience mechanism, then we can openly see what is meant by these symbols.
Well, as we read here, initial conscientious flux of the preparation to the plan of duty. The religious and moral institutions explained and connected several disciplined sanctions to these symbols, especially for the initial human realities that are mythical and mystical, that need to be directed, that are automatic, that are not properly making cause and effect connections. And those realities benefited greatly by the functions of these symbols and their related sanctions. And we must remember that there are still human fellows that need that reality due to their level of development. I mean, those sanctions and motivations are still valid for many human beings. But for the rest of us, it is time to see greater chains of causes and effects, to understand the divine system with much wider comprehensions. And in our times, all kinds of teachings, all kinds of explanations of many symbols and concepts are active. Humans can access all knowledge humanity could gain so far. There is no occult, unrevealed, veiled or hidden knowledge anymore. And consequently, the test and trial become harder because now we must choose wisely, by taking our sense of responsibility to our life plan and communal plan into consideration. And as we take more responsibility, we mature more, and at this level of our development, we act and choose, not because there are rewards or punishments, but because of the love of duty. First, we do things for self-interest, later for your family, next for the city and community you live in, and later, we extend this towards to whole humanity, and beyond this point, there is no need to think about doing things for the greater good, because this becomes an internal push forward, you cannot help it but do. And we see examples of such higher levels of human dedication. Do you remember the earthquake in Japan? Because of the tremors and the resulted tsunami, Fukushima nuclear plant was damaged, and because of the threat of the meltdown, the inside of the nuclear plant had to be inspected, and some staff of the plant were volunteered for this job because the remote-controlled robots were not working due to the high radiation levels. Those human beings certainly knew that this meant death for them. Sooner or later, still, they went into the fuel chambers to assess the damage and do whatever they could do to prevent further disasters. When I heard the news, I had pondered upon their action, their volunteering for this task that meant certain death. Yes, we hear such news, but they don't strongly strike our comprehension or conscience, mostly because such news are so rare nowadays. And because most of the news are about the ever-widening schisms, they are most feeding the sensuality side of our conscience mechanism. Well, as these schisms widen more and more, it may be that at some point, the seemingly separated sides of these schisms will be closed, but I think the progress of things must reach a certain peak, and because of these the pressure of individual and communal events are also ever increasing.
Indeed, we see such examples when a disaster strikes a region in our country. Suddenly, everyone clasps hands, they stop thinking about each other's ideology, economical status, beliefs, or reality, they simply suspend or deactivate their judgments and prejudices. Still, as things start to go back to so-called normal, they may activate those old realities, but again, such events change everyone, be it this or that way. However, at the global scale, I think this peak point is still far away.
You are right. That peak is still at the distance, but how distant? We don't know. We read in this book about a sojourner planet, getting nearer and influencing the magnetic fields of the solar system. Yet we hear the threats from the presidents of many countries about possible nuclear attacks. I mean, the humanity is very capable to end itself without any external factor. You know that joke, that humanity can become united only in case of alien invasion. The truth hidden in this joke is that we need an external threat for such a radical change. That is, humanity cannot wake up without the opposite pole. All right, this was the status quo so far. Yet now, we are expected to reach such a level that, without needing external threats, oppositions, adversity, or enemy, we must display the comprehension of that higher level. Because all of us know very well that the other option is easy.
Regardless of the lengths of time it takes to build something, destroying that thing takes seconds. In this sense, I say that humanity is in the test of existence, because one moment we are, and next moment, we know more. Yes, anything may happen anytime to end our life, but what will we do until that moment comes? Just wait? Or try to do our best for aligning with our individual and communal life plans, so we can complete all of our needs by productively involving and contributing to the events and relations in our life? I think the answer is obvious. That's why, looking at things from the lens of the principles is beneficial. Yes, there are more aims, purposes, and targets stated for us at the background of the events in our life, and, either as individuals or communities, we cannot see them openly, at best, sometimes intuit these. Yet, as we choose and act conscientiously, and as our comprehension widens, our lens or perspective may reach a level to provide us a greater and wider angle to look at things. And, we are assessing and valuating things from the superficial time comprehension. This is the reality of our world. Only a small part of the future is detectable for us. The beings in duty that have much wider perspectives may see the far greater future revealing of the consequences of our choices and actions active. So, maybe we cannot know which events will happen, but we can accept the fact that no matter what happens there will always be a nuance for furthering our being's development, and we can continue choosing and acting by this knowing.
Yes, that's why whenever a dear friend asks about how I can discover my life purpose, what is my duty in life, I kindly remind them what they need to do in their life is their life purpose. I mean, if a person is a mother or a father, if a person has a job, as an employer or as an employee, if a person has some certain responsibilities because of their life situations or business, then that thing is your life purpose. Doing that job or task by making choices and actions from the intuition of duty side of our conscience mechanism, as much as we can. After all, the divine order and the universe kindly brings us into line. For mankind in the world there is no question of obligation of duty. All right, let's continue reading. Higher levels of conscience are together with resignation and self-sacrifice. Therefore, one cannot pass into there with the desires of the lower levels. Higher levels are the closest steps to the knowledge of duty which has no relevance, even in the slightest degree, with those kinds of selfishness. So, the concept of payment that is expected against a deed at the lower levels leaves its place to the reality of volunteering that is based on the love of duty at the higher levels. Even the personal interest that has been ambitiously run after at the lower levels may be a source of suffering for the ones at the higher levels. In this way, a being who attained the power of ability to do his deeds with heart and soul, and with the purpose of serving others around by distancing away from the state of obtaining his material interests and even making it an end for himself, has now matured enough to leap from the uppermost levels of the world boundary to the fields of duty. And when he reaches this degree, after completing the suitable duty given to him by the plan of duty, he passes directly into the plan of duty. However, there is an intermediary plan which those of mankind who have completed the world school but have not yet taken on duty will pass through, and we call it the semi-subtle realm. And after passing over this intermediary plan, the beings will reach the initial stages of the great plan of duty and begin their true evolutions.
Yes, obviously, we are not there yet. Nevertheless, we, as the family of humankind, will gradually and eventually go through all further stages and reach the initial steps of the plan of duty. And so far, we have been talking of the development of the being, but after that stage, true evolution of the beings will begin. We already discussed our human condition, we read in this book. For mankind in the world there is no question of obligation of duty. So, here and now, our main task and purpose is to become adequate for reaching the plan of duty, and this means that we must acknowledge and appreciate all possibilities and opportunities of further development the events of life bring us at each moment.
Another point in this passage is, yes, there may be beings that can directly pass to the plan of duty. Maybe a few such as prophets, great initiates, but those human beings should have the power of ability to do his deeds with heart and soul, and with the purpose of serving others. Considering our general situation as the family of humankind, that is, still driven by self-interest and sensuality, then it is obvious that majority of human beings will go first to an intermediary plan, a semi-subtle realm that is called as the plan of love, and only after completing this stage of development, human beings can pass to the plan of duty. And in that semi-subtle realm, our main task will be learning to manage subtle energies by the power of imagination.
Yes, again we are at this point in the discussion about the questions we need to ask ourselves and sincerely answer. Do I have the power of ability to do my deeds with heart and soul and with the purpose of serving others? Most of us like to think ourselves as selfless, but are we really? By such and similar questioning, we must check our inner world all the time. Yes, there are people who can give unconditionally or without expectations. And also, there are people who cannot give without big or small calculations of getting back something. So, our task is to observe our inner world and our first-hand experiences to gain stem knowledge, and also, to observe others and their experiences to gain branch knowledge about the consequences of the choices and actions made from either side or component of our conscience mechanism. The effort we make in this direction will determine our pace and rhythm on our path extending toward the plan of love and the plan of duty.
Yes, next week we will go deeper into such questions. Thank you, dear sister. We made a good start this evening. And thank you, dear friends, for your attendance. Hoping to see you next week.
Good evening, everyone.